Walk in beauty, it's all around you. Walk in beauty, let love surround you. Walk in beauty, make it around you. Walk in beauty with love for all.
Hi, this is Brooke, and we're here with our second class about the love without end. And love is the answer. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because Love Without End is a really remarkable book. It's the best treatise I know on love. So I'm going to begin with a prayer, and then we'll just get right into things. Oh, great Mother, Father, all our blessed guides, all our helpers. We're so glad on this day to be able to come together. We know that love is the great force of bonding and connection. And this is one of these most interesting ways where we're able to be connected and bonded to each other in love and good energy. And so as always, I ask that I be a hollow bone to bring through the truest and finest of the great teachings of love that are in every tradition. We see them more directly in some of the traditions that maybe we know in this part of the world. And yet that love is the basis of so many of the really deep and true traditions. And so we ask that this beautiful energy be able to come through today, because we know how powerful and useful, beneficial it is, not only to us, but through us to all our relations. Ho, Mitakuyasan. All my relations. All right. So we're going to be talking about spiritual traditions of love and the heart. And I want to say that I personally am not, I guess, what you'd call formally Christian religious. But what's fascinating to me is that since I was a very young child, I've been deeply connected to Jesus. And I believe that's about the teaching of love. For me, that's the basis of the whole ballgame. And I think sometimes religions or churches or church groups get caught in dogma and fighting and hassling about things. And for me, that kind of gets you off of the side of what, for me anyway, it's really about. I know when I was in, I traveled all over Europe, and one of the first places I ended up was in Venice. And oh my gosh, beautiful cathedrals and churches, and I mean, all the great masters, paintings in there. And I was looking and looking, and I was so fascinated. And then I started to realize that, I mean, there would be ceilings, these gold, gilded, gorgeous, exquisite ceilings that would go for half a block. And all that was painted on there were Christian warriors fighting with each other and blood and, just all this conflict and stuff. And I just went, that's not my spirituality anyway. So I began to take pictures only of the women. And of course, I have a million of those, but of the women and the connection and the children and the kindness and the beauty that you see in the representations of the women. I want to share something with you that was said by he's a philosopher and theologian, I believe he's English, named G.K. Chesterton. And he said that there's nothing wrong with Christianity, it just hasn't been tried yet. And I think that's really, it has a little bit of humor to it, but in a way, for me, it says that as much as we're working toward the ways of love and the heart in the world, walking the path with heart is the way our native people talk about it. We haven't made it yet. We tend to get in groups and start fighting with each other, and that's not it. That's not really trying and working with what I think are the essential principles. So anyway, I love to share some of the stories of Jesus, and I realize that for many of you, or certainly some of you, you might have been raised in religious families that that were about conflict or anger, or this is wrong, or you're going to hell, or you were raised, you are sinful. That's your basic, that's your basic sense is sin and all of that. And that's just not where I go with it. I have a whole different connection to Jesus. And it really is about love. It's about love and connection, and about the connection to the natural world. That loving teaching of the fields and the seas and the fishes and the grapes and all of that kind of teaching, and this very connected sense of connection to the feminine, to love, nurturing, and to women as these amazing women that were around him. So I found a book, maybe by accident, by good synchronicity, really, by a gift from Creator. And the book is called Love Without End. And there's a gal named Glenda Green, little Texas gal, and she was a Smithsonian exhibited portrait artist. And on I believe it was Christmas Eve one time, their house caught on fire. A little kitty came and woke them up. They all jumped out the window and made it, but everything was destroyed, including many of her exquisite paintings, very, worth a lot. Well, in the midst of that, her husband said to her, "Honey, I just had this dream last night." They were in a motel, not able to go home to their burned house. He said, "I had this dream, and Jesus came to me, and I believe you're supposed to paint a painting of Jesus." And she goes, "Whoa, boy, just slow down here, slow down." She said, "Yes, I'm a portrait artist, but painting a painting of Jesus would be, it'd be like a theological statement. Like, how do I know what he looks like? How do I mean, just no. Well, over time, she began to have visions and began to be pulled toward that, and all these interesting things began to happen. And one day, in her studio, Jesus appeared. And he said to her, I know what she said to her husband. I forgot to tell you this. She said to her husband, "I'm a portrait artist, and if Jesus comes and sits for me, I'll paint him." She thought that finished it. Done. I don't have to worry about that anymore. Well, one day, this shimmering light came into her studio, and it resolved itself into Jesus. And he spent months with her as she made this beautiful painting called The Lamb and the Lion. And he talked with her. And one of the first things he said to her is, "Glenda, you are love. You're made of love. That's who you are." And so they had this incredible dialogue. And for me, it's one of the finest books about love that you could possibly get your hands on. I feel like I wish that our traditional Bible had more teaching about love and how we do that, because love is, we get it mixed up with romance and hurt and breakups and sex and, who knows what all we get it mixed up with. But the real essence of love, I don't think is taught very well. You should love. Well, how? You should be unconditionally loving. I don't know exactly how to do that. I've never gotten there. So I think we get thrown off about all of this. So I want to tell you an interesting story about one of the really incredible principles that comes out of these wonderful teachings. And it's a story about the difference between love and structure. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about that in this time that we have together. So Jesus tells a story that he and Judas were childhood friends. They were best pals. His dad was basically at a construction company, you might say. And Judas's dad was one of the high religious officials, very traditional religious officials. But they were friends, and the family spent time together. And so he said that Judas was always great to have around, because even when they were children, Judas knew that there was something special about him. because he said he would sometimes take a stick and turn it into a snake. And Judas was like, oh my gosh, because he was a being of incredibly high siddhis, they're called in some traditions, of high ability to manifest and do all these different things. And so Judas knew he was very, very special. And one of the interesting things that Jesus said is that they'd play hide and seek. And he said, when Judas would hide, he knew where to find him. He was behind the biggest structure around. He'd go run behind a building or behind some big tree or something, and you could always find him there. And he said what he would do is, when it was his turn to hide, he would hide out in the middle of a field, just kind of tuck down and sit out in the middle of a field. And Judas would be running around looking at all the structures and never find him. So that they had this very, very different mindset. But a lot of the teaching is about the difference between what is solid and structured and formed and built and, in a sense, immovable or unchangeable. And the other part of life, which is this flowing, moving, in a way it sounds like the feminine, doesn't it? It's that moving, it's the things between the structures. And so there's enormous enormous power there. And over time, just to quickly finish that story, Judas was one of his best pals and of course became one of his disciples. And what Judas believed was that Jesus would become the king of the Jews. He would become the political leader, the structured leader, the traditional kind of person that's in charge of everybody and is the boss of everything. So when it came time for Jesus to be taken by the guards, Judas thought, well, that's probably a good idea, because as soon as they grabbed him, I mean, Judas had seen him do amazing things, absolutely amazing things. And Judas thought, well, as soon as they grab him, he'll just do some magic, some amazing magic, and he'll win, and then everybody will hear about it, and then he'll show off all these good powers, and then pretty soon he's going to be the king. But that wasn't how it played out. Jesus let himself be taken, and when Judas realized what was happening, he couldn't stand it. He committed suicide because he never understood. And Jesus said that he was interested. Judas was always wonderful to have around, because if there were going to be objections about sort of the specifics or that kind of thing about politics or structure or things that weren't about love and connection and interplay and bonding and unity and love and joining and interconnection, all of those other things, any objections, Judas would have them. And so Jesus knew what other people were going to be objecting to, and he could talk to it and speak to it. So anyway, that whole teaching was about love and connection, and the actual power of that when we are connected, when we're connected to the great source of life within us, the mother, father energy of life that is within us, and when we're connected to each other, there's enormous love, and I mean, there's enormous power in that. So, also in that process, Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene were involved in that. And although it isn't expressed as much in the kind of traditional texts that are much more male-oriented texts, there was this incredible teaching of love. And they were, as one of the traditions I follow says, they were carriers of the book of love, that they remained very much focused on the loving part of things, the women in that circle. And that what they realized is that love includes everything and everyone. And that it also includes the body. because one of the things that's happened in some of the teachings is that there's that sense of we have to get out of our body and, kind of go up and out in order to be spiritual or religious, because there's something that says the body is no good. Well, in the deepest teachings, there's really that sense of embodied spirituality, that our bodies are absolutely magical. They were gifted us by the Great Mother. They're filled with love. We have the capacity to create life and love through them, and that the body is a very much accepted part of the richness of these spiritual traditions. Excuse me. So I want to mention, just because I was speaking about Mary Magdalene, I want to mention a couple books in case anyone's interested. There's a book called, I can't even think who the author is, I'm sorry, I didn't write it down, but called Magdalene Revealed, a very beautiful book about a woman who got connected with all of those teachings and really learned about the depth of teaching about love that's involved in that. Another one that I just did a endorsement for is called The Magdalene Mysteries, The Left-Hand Path of the Feminine. And that's by Saran, S-A-R-A-N, Bertrand. And so anyway, there's some wonderful teachings. And as a lot of you know, there were books in the Bible, including the Book of Mary. And when the church fathers at the Council of, was it Nicaea, a long time ago, they chose the books they wanted to have out there for people, and all the other books got put back. But now they're coming into those, and there are some amazing books and teachings through all of that. But really the center of it was love and the embodiment, even as a woman, embodying the goddess in the human body and embodying love through the human body.